Metzl joins me now. He's an author and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Why is the U.S. making such a move, do you think, requesting the extradition of such a top Chinese executive? What's behind it?
Well, there are a lot of things. First is that the United States has been concerned for a number of years about the activities of Chinese companies like Huawei, like ZTE, first for theft of U.S. intellectual property. But then for violating U.S. sanctions regimes, and particularly these high-tech companies have licenses for and use a lot of U.S. components. And it's been pretty brazen in the past that these companies are selling into Iran, North Korea, Cuba, and other sanctioned U.S. countries. And now, after the experience of ZTE, where the Trump administration at first took a hard line and then backed off, Huawei allegedly has kept going, violating those sanctions. And so I think there's a very strong statement that is being made in this particular case. But it's in the context of a much bigger issue, a much bigger concern of the United States, which is the increasing tensions with China that aren't just about this, and frankly, they aren't just about the deficit. It's about addressing some big structural problems in the Chinese economy and which threaten the U.S. Future growth.
Sure, but so how is China likely to react here?
Well, they're going to react in a very tough and aggressive way.
Because they've been subdued so far, right? She was arrested December 1st. It's been several days.
But China has bigger fish to fry than this. This is a big deal. But getting the trade relationship with the United States wrong is a much bigger deal. And so definitely this is a shot across the bow. But I think that China is going to be relatively restrained because they don't have an interest in risking everything based just on this, even though this is certainly significant.
So they're going to let a top executive, you think, be extradited to the U.S., tried potentially in the United States in court?
Well, they're going to put pressure. They're going to put pressure on the Canadians, but the Canadians will be in a very difficult position. The Canadians probably won't be able to hand her back to the Chinese. They have an extradition treaty with the United States. There will be a hearing, and that will require, as we just heard, some kind of internal process inside of Canada. Maybe there'll be some negotiation involving the United States and China and Canada. Maybe Huawei will make some kind of promises to amend its ways in its relationships with Iran and Cuba. And others. So there are a lot of things that could happen. But again, I don't think China is going to put this issue on the top of their priority list because there are much more significant issues currently at play.
But what I find interesting, I mean, Huawei, I'll be honest, I mean, I was familiar with the name. I knew it was a Chinese tech giant. I had no idea how big. They're bigger than Apple in terms of actual mobile handsets. They're the biggest tech component company in the world. I mean, we're talking here about a dominant business. And to have the heir apparent of that business potentially facing extradition to the U.S., could it prolong a trade war? And trade wars are obviously extremely damaging, not just to China, but to the United States as well, and to a president who has sold himself to the American people as, you know, the man who can perform miracles for the U.S. economy.
So a lot of questions embedded there, but certainly this is a big deal for China, but it's not as big of a deal as the broader trade war. So the trade war will play out on its own terms in many ways, irrespective of this, and the big tension that we're seeing in the trade war is that the U.S. is pushing both for deficit reduction and for structural reforms in China that will lead to less theft of U.S. intellectual property, greater market access, less forced technology transfers from U.S. companies to China. So that's what the United States wants. China is going to try to pay off the United States with just deficit reduction by buying more soybeans, more liquefied natural gas, and hope that that's going to be enough. Because if China is forced to make big structural changes, that's going to have huge domestic repercussions in China. So that's the big game. This is certainly significant, but as important as it is, the story of this one arrest is not the main story.
Okay, well, I'm glad you've made that clear. John Bolton, by the way, the U.S. National Security Advisor, told NPR that he knew in advance of this arrest, and he wasn't sure if the president was made aware. I believe they were in Argentina at the time. Jamie Metzl, thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it.